Today we're going to do something very, very special. Because today we're going to be talking about the first ever Valorant Hall of Fame class of 2024. Now, this is my Valorant Hall of Fame, okay? So I will ultimately be making the choices because it's my channel. This isn't a democracy, it is a dictatorship. However, there is a People's Choice Awards at the end for who people voted for. I got about 1,500 responses of people voting for who they thought should be in the Valorant Hall of Fame. So we will get to that at the end of the video. But with that said, let's talk about what gets you into the Valorant Hall of Fame. Let's talk about the rules of what makes you eligible. So the first thing is we are going to elect 5 players and 1 coach will enter the Valorant Hall of Fame. And we're hopefully going to do this every single year. So 6 people will be in this year, and then, there'll be 6 more next year. So there'll be 12, and, hopefully we'll keep this going. The next thing is that once you are elected into the Hall of Fame, you hopefully will stay there. I say hopefully because maybe these people will do terrible things. I don't know, but hopefully they won't, and hopefully they will stay there forever. How you can be nominated for the Hall of Fame is that you have to be retired. You have to be retired, or you can't be on a team and you didn't finish last season on a team. I know it's a bit confusing, but basically the way that this works out is so that essentially they've probably played their last Valorant. Now, they might not have done, they might return to Valorant at some point. They probably have played their last Valorant. And for instance, when I say that you're not on a team and didn't finish last season on a team, one of the nominees is Redgar. Redgar did play for Giants last year, but he didn't finish the season for Giant X, and he isn't on a team right now as far as I'm aware, so he is eligible. But someone like Artis, whilst he isn't on a team that I know of right now, he did finish the season with Na'Vi last year, so he is not eligible. So that is kind of how to kind of pass it out and think about that, or they can just be retired. Right. The next thing is only accomplishment in Valorant will be considered. So, of course, some of these people have, mega accomplishments in other games. They don't really count in this Valorant Hall of Fame for me. So with that out of the way, let's talk about who the finalists and nominees were. And this list was basically just created by me and my Twitch and YouTube chat on a live stream of people that we thought fit the criteria. So if we missed anyone, blame my Twitch and YouTube chat for not considering them. But let's begin. And our first nominee, our first finalist is Benkai. And Benkai is, of course, most known for his time on Paper Rex. During his run with the team starting in early 2021, Paper Rex proved themselves to be one of the dominant forces of SEA, making it to their first international at Masters Berlin. However, it was in 2022 when things really kicked into high gear for Paper Rex, making it to all 3 internationals that year, finishing 4th at Reykjavik, and perhaps Benkai's most notable feat of finishing 2nd in Masters Copenhagen. Benkai is known for helping lead one of the most chaotic teams in Valorant's history and putting Southeast Asian Valorant on the map. And of course, you can't forget Benkai's lasting legacy of his iconic walkouts. Next up, we have Bone Cold. And Bone Cold's legacy in Valorant was sealed very early on, with the year in 2021 leading Ascend to winning the grand final of Stage 1 EMEA Masters, qualifying to Masters Berlin, ultimately losing in the quarterfinals to 100 Thieves, but then managing to win the first ever champs by beating Gambit in the final 3-2. Whilst he may have never reached those heights again, his legacy will always remain of being the leader of the first ever Valorant champs winner. Our next nominee is Hiko. Hiko is of course synonymous with early 100 Thieves Valorant. That is where he spent his whole Valorant career and was one of the big names in the early stages of the game. He also found some early success, winning First Strike NA, beating TSM 3-1 in the final, and making it to Masters Berlin, where he would go on a run to the semi-finals, eventually losing to Envy. Next up, it's Laz. Valorant in Japan has become exceedingly popular, and one of its biggest reasons is simply Laz. He is the face of Japanese Valorant, and it really all starts with one of the greatest Valorant runs in history. Coming into Masters Reykjavik in 2022, Japanese teams were simply seen as a bit of a meme, being weaker than almost any other region. Laz and his Zeta Division team were mocked by those in the scene, but then, all of a sudden, they started to turn into a completely different team, beating opponents many would have never given them a chance against. Whilst they ultimately ended up finishing 3rd, the impact this run had on many Valorant fans will never be forgotten, and Laz was the figurehead of that run, paving the way for immense popularity of Valorant that we see today in Japan. Next up, it's Mixwell. Mixwell's impact on the game of Valorant is larger than what he just did as a player. Perhaps the greatest achievement of Mixwell's Valorant career was popularizing the game to many within the Spanish-speaking community. This legacy was such that he's been given the nickname the Father of Valorant. But his playing career also found some success. Spending most of his time with G2, he did win some early tournaments in 2020 and made it to Masters Berlin in 2021 and Reykjavik in 2022. Don't worry though, we won't mention the 13-0. Oh wait. Next up, it's Nuki. Nuki's time in Valorant is perhaps one of slight frustration, as he never quite reached the pinnacle like so many might have expected him to. It started well with a win in EMEA First Strike with Team Heretics, and once he did manage to make a couple of Masters tournaments, his teams couldn't quite put together a winning run. But what is not in doubt is Nuki's insane talent and ability to completely take over games, often leaving you gobsmacked at some of the things that he was able to do. Next up, it's Redgar. The streets remember when Redgar's posture was one of the biggest Valorant talking points. The focus was on Redgar's neck because often when his Gambit team played, the result of the game wasn't much in doubt. That Gambit side that Redgar led is iconic, winning Masters Berlin and then making the Champs Grand Final. There was an aura to that team that perhaps has never really been matched. After his time on Gambit and Mech, Redgar then moved to Liquid, where of course he managed to win the first ever EMEA title in the partnership era. And then we come to Sassy. Sassy is one of the original torchbearers for Brazilian Valorant, actually starting with Team Vikings and their initial forays into the international scene, but of course it all really kicked off when Sassy joined Loud, the Brazilian super team that lived up to the hype. After losing in the grand final of Reykjavik to Optic, they got their revenge at Champs, becoming the first and up to now only Brazilian team to win a title. But it didn't end there for Sassy, because after that he would then join Sentinels, which perhaps at first didn't look like the best move until they went to Masters Madrid and won it all. This makes Sassy the only player in Valorant to have won a Champs and a Masters title. Next up, it's Scream. Scream is simply iconic. Of course, he is best known for his time on Team Liquid, and whilst Liquid did achieve some success, such as making it to various international tournaments and winning multiple LCQs, and getting to the semi-finals of Champs 2021, ultimately Scream is just known for being able to take people's heads off in a way which basically no one else could. Whilst it never ended in a championship win for Scream, many will remember him as one of the best pure aimers the game has ever seen. And then we have Shazam. Shazam's time in Valorant is of course best remembered for his time on Sentinels. The 2021 Sentinels is a team that won't be forgotten and really kicked off the legacy of the biggest org in Valorant. Winning NA Masters into a flawless victory of the first International Masters tournament is a feat that literally hasn't been repeated. No other team has won an international tournament as dominantly as Sentinels did the first one. It should be noted for that period of time as well that Sentinels didn't have a coach. Shazam was leading the team completely on his own and dominating everyone at the same time. Next up, we have Sick. Sick's time in Valorant was perhaps shorter than many would have liked or expected, because as one of the members of that iconic Sentinels team, he was used to winning many games. But not only was Sick winning, many people at the time saw him as the potential future of Valorant because he was so good at the game. Therefore, whilst he does have that championship win, it may always be a question of what could have been. And then we have Sub Rosa. It is difficult to get a position on a map named after you. It's even more difficult to have a position on a map named after you when that position on the map is also a literal representation of your in-game name. Yet Sub Rosa, beneath the rose, managed to do it. Not only that, it's also difficult to become an everlasting meme. But Sub Rosa managed to do that as well by being so bad at Raze ulting that whenever someone misses one, even to this day, many years later, it is still called a Rosa. And then finally for the players, we have TenZ. TenZ is the literal face of Valorant. He is the icon amongst Valorant icons. He is a multiple-time Masters winner, has one of, if not the best performance across a Masters tournament of all time, is included in clickbait titles everywhere, and had a $1 million buyout that was probably the best deal that Sentinels ever made. There is really not that much to say about TenZ, because he is literally the guy in Valorant. But now let's move on to the coaches, and our first coach is BZK. BZK was the coach of the Loud team, which showed everyone that Brazilian Valorant was not just about how good your fragging was. His team said that not only are we going to massively out-aim you, but we're also going to outplay you, and this was proven when he and his Loud team won Champs in 2022. Next up, we have Doombros. Doombros' career with FPX and Na'Vi is of course tied to his relationship with Angel, a career which culminated in many successful runs, but none more so than the winning of Masters Copenhagen. The streets remember what really happened to FPX in 2022, and whilst Optic and Loud fans don't want to hear it, many believe FPX would have won Reykjavik had they been able to attend as well. What shouldn't go amiss is that FPX was so good in 2022, despite the fact that they had a rotating cast of players due to so many things out of their control going wrong. And then finally, we have Mini. Mini is the only head coach to have won 2 international tournaments. His Fnatic teams had always been good, they made it to the first ever international final at Reykjavik, but the effort all paid off in 2023 when Fnatic went on a dominant run to the final of Lock-In, only to be down 11-3 in the final map before pulling off the greatest comeback in Valorant history. After that, they then just decided to become the first and still only team in Valorant history to win back-to-back titles at Masters Tokyo. So those were the nominations, and now we are going to elect 5 players and 1 coach into my Valorant Hall of Fame. And remember, if you really disagree with me and someone's not there that you really think should be, they can still be nominated next year and still get in next year. There's nothing stopping them from doing that. So it's not that they might never get in, even if they don't get in today. So with that out of the way, now let's talk about who's going to make it into my Hall of Fame for 2024. And the first person who's going to make my list is really no great surprise because it's going to be TenZ. And really, I can think of no greater person to be the first person into the Hall of Fame for Valorant than TenZ. I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, will agree. The second person into the Hall of Fame will be a teammate of TenZ, and that, of course, is Sassy. As I said, Sassy is the only player to win a Champs and a Masters as well, and was just really good for a very long time, and definitely, I think, is deserving of the Hall of Fame. The third person into the Hall of Fame, we're going to not have a Sentinels player this time, it's Laz. Now, Laz for me is proof that you can get into the Hall of Fame. It's not just about counting international titles, but Laz is just iconic. Just has to be in because he's just so important for kind of the culture of Valorant in that region. The fourth player that will be getting into my Hall of Fame is Redgar. I had to put Redgar in because that Gambit team to me is just so iconic. Those of you who watched Valorant back then will know what I'm talking about, and Redgar as the leader of that team, you know, was kind of the leader of that aura as well. Finally, the fifth person I'm going to put into my Hall of Fame class is Shazam. Now, some of you I know will think that this is perhaps a bit of a weird choice, but I do think that you have to consider that Shazam didn't have a coach, and Sentinels was super dominant. And again, when you're thinking about like iconic teams of Valorant, obviously that initial Sentinels team has to be in there. And then finally, the coach that I'm going to pick here to go alongside our 5 players for the class of 2024 is, of course, Mini. Mini won multiple titles. There isn't too much other than that. He's a great coach. So this is my class of 2024 for my Hall of Fame in Valorant. But I know that a lot of you won't agree with my choices, so let's instead take a look at what the people chose instead. So I sent out a Google form with those same options of the nominees that I just read out there to you as well, and this is what I got back from about 1,500 responses. So at the bottom here, you've got actually the people that were chosen by the people, essentially. You can see that TenZ was, you know, way out in front. Almost everyone had TenZ. A lot of people had Sassy. Next up was Laz, just over 50%. So people agreed with my first 3, but then the last 2 actually we had disagreements on because the people decided to choose Scream and Benkai, with Mini being the coach. Here is the little coach. You can see that most people definitely picked Mini here to be the coach, 82%. So that was never really in doubt. But you can see that there was some disagreement as to who the other people should be in. Of course, people come from different regions. Maybe there's some bias towards certain people or not, or whether they're more likable or more known. I don't know. But this is what the people chose. And so that is my Hall of Fame for 2024. As I say, I hope to be doing this in 2025, 2026, and on and on and on until, you know, I'm old and gray, essentially. And we can keep adding more and more people to this list. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Who do you think was snubbed from the Hall of Fame? Who definitely should have got in? Maybe you disagree with me. Maybe you disagree with the people. Let me know in the comments down below.